Donald Trump addressing the Me Too movement directly for the first time last night in that speech and using it as a punchline. So in a moment, I turn to an exclusive interview with Rachel Crooks, one of the 19 women who's accused Trump of sexual misconduct. But first, I want to show you exactly what happened. This is a story that you can imagine any president doing would be a very big deal. Here is the president of the United States mocking alleged victims as a way to take a political jab at Senator Elizabeth Warren.
In the middle of the debate, when she proclaims that she's of Indian heritage, we will take that little kid and say, but we have to do it gently. Because we're in the Me Too generation, so we have to be very gentle. And we will slowly toss it, hoping it doesn't hit her and injure her arm.
Warren responding by criticizing Trump for testing the DNA of migrant kids taken from their parents and being too incompetent to reunite the families. Trump's apparent mockery of Me Too comes on the same day that he also took an action people in the movement feel is very disturbing, giving a top White House job to Bill Shine, a Fox executive ousted over accusations that he enabled or stood by during multiple reports of sexual misconduct in that office by Roger Ailes, as well as Bill O'Reilly, both of whom were also, of course, defended by Trump.
In an interview with the New York Times, Trump called O'Reilly a good person. Trump said, "I think he shouldn't have settled," adding, "I don't think Bill did anything wrong."
Finally, Roger Ailes. Is he helping you? Is he advising you?
I can tell you that some of the women that are complaining, I know how much he's helped them. He's a very good person. I've always found him to be just a very, very good person.
I'm joined now by Rachel Crooks, who accused Trump of forcibly kissing her without her consent when she was working at Trump Tower in 2005, and she is now running for office in the Ohio State Legislature. Rachel, first, your reaction to what the president said last night.
Well, thank you for having me, Ari. You know, of course, nothing that President Trump says anymore shocks me, but I think it's truly despicable, you know, that he would mock the Me Too movement and, of course, say many of the other egregious things that he made comments about. But yeah, nothing shocks me. He, of course, would make fun of it. He hasn't been held accountable for his own actions, so he would make light of the Me Too movement. That makes perfect sense to me.
What does your candidacy say to women who look out in this environment and see, on the one hand, the world changing in some ways that involve accountability, however delayed, but in other ways see this kind of behavior at the top of the federal government?
Yeah, I mean, the silver lining to President Trump's tenure has been that women are uniting and resisting, and we are fed up with this behavior. That is what Me Too is. Candidacy is built on this idea that politicians, though, seem to not be held accountable, and President Trump is the epitome of that. So I will continue to speak out so that I can be a voice for women who, you know, don't feel like their voices are being heard. And
I'm curious, before we turn to our wider panel, what kind of reaction do you get from voters? I mean, how many people see this as a positive or important thing that you're doing, and how many, I imagine, because any local race can be about local issues, see this as an aside and are focused on what you're going to do for Ohio?
Yeah, mostly locally, everyone is very focused on what I can do for the district. But of course, I think nationally, people are very engaged and encouraged by my candidacy because, you know, it is in direct response in some ways to the Me Too movement and President Trump being in office and not being held accountable for his actions. And it continues. And the Republicans who are sort of letting him go and not holding him accountable, I think, are complicit in these actions. And I hope in November that America votes them out.
Stay with me. I want to add in Mara Gay, who works in the New York Times editorial board, and Terry O'Neill, former president of the National Organization for Women and serves now as executive director of the National Employer Lawyers Association. Mara, this is one of the many stories when you look at the president's behavior last night, where running the thought experiment, which is part of what we try to do if you look at a story objectively, what would the response be if President Obama said something like that last night, or President Bush, or President Carter, any other president speaking that way about what is, again, as you know, allegations of criminal conduct, it would be the biggest thing going on.
Well, I just want to say, first of all, that I believe Rachel Crooks. I believe the other some 18 women who have come forward with allegations about the president. And I just find it extremely disturbing. This would be seen, and it would actually be a useful political line for the president. I mean, I'm looking at the president, but I'm also looking at this cheering crowd of his supporters who are reacting with such tribalism, with such cruelty. And I can't, maybe I'm just naive, but I really can't believe that all those people are in their heart bad people. I just wonder if, you know, honestly, they're under some kind of a spell, and that does not absolve anybody of taking responsibility. But, you know, you can't help but see that and just want to register every voter imaginable.
Well, you say spell. There's plenty of research on group and mob dynamics, and whether in a one-on-one conversation, that type of thing or that type of thing with an objection, with someone saying, wait a minute, why are you making light of violent crime, which is really what we're talking about, would go differently. But you're saying you were disturbed as well by the reaction.
I am. And again, I think part of the problem with how we've come here is by not actually holding all voters, and I would say specifically white voters, frankly, holding folks accountable as adults. So that is an issue. But I do think that you mentioned Barack Obama. I mean, that's someone who, for all of his, whatever his faults were, was appealing to the better angels of our nature. And there's a lot of honor in that. And Donald Trump is the exact opposite. That does not absolve voters of individual responsibility. But I think it does say that leadership matters, that the morality or lack thereof of the people in office matters. And it does seem like